Hello and welcome to our Gem Pursuit. My name is Matthew Weldon and I'm joined in our magical and mysterious pursuit through the world of antique and vintage jewellery by my trusty co-host Alyce Ketcher. Hello Alyce.
Hi everyone, it's good to be back.
Today we are bringing you a very special bonus episode that was actually requested by a listener of ours who got in contact through Instagram called Raf. Although we wrapped up our series Royal Regalia, A History of Splendour in our last episode, we've been asked to take a look at a very special royal collection which we just could not omit. So far we've covered Denmark, Iran, the UK and Ireland, and this country's collections of jewels is just as spectacular. The kingdom's history spans over 1,000 years and has a protected jewel collection featuring some of the most impressive parures and tiaras you will see anywhere in the world, including an incredibly unique tiara that, while spectacular, has actually not one diamond in it at all. Alyce, do reveal who we are talking about today.
We're back in Scandinavia today, Matthew. We're back with the Swedes.
Gotta love the Scandies.
So let's start off with the history of the Swedish royal family. Matthew, the connections in the Swedish royal family to the Danish, the British, the Norwegian, I mean, it literally, their family trees read like a bowl of spaghetti. This is crazy. It's like meow, meow, meow everywhere. And also the French also come into it a little later on. So like, where do we start?
Yeah, I think, to understand the jewellery and how it gets to where it gets in which collection, I think, having done a few episodes of the royal collections, it's such subtle things like a particular marriage that happened and then 200 years later the jewels end up in a different location because of these decisions along the way. And a bowl of spaghetti is the right word. And there's a fantastic family tree that we'll put up on our Instagram and put a link to it in the show notes that just shows you exactly how intertwined the royal family trees of Sweden, Denmark, the United Kingdom and Norway are. I mean, they're really, really intertwined. And there's also Russian and German influences in there as well, and the French. And I think particularly when it comes to the Swedish royal family, we have to understand what happened in 1810 and the House of Bernadotte.
Yes. So like, first off, I want to start by saying like Sweden or the Scandinavian people are recorded as having rulers as early as prehistoric times. So like that kind of...
I don't think it was prehistoric.
I mean, they did. Yeah. If you have a look at it, they're one of the very first hunter-gatherers that actually decide to have rulers. So it's very unusual. And actually it kind of links in well to their kind of persona, I would say, because they're very, I would say, organized people. So it's very interesting when you look through it. We then go into kind of skipping many generations. We go into the Viking eras. And during the Viking eras, we have, again, kingdoms that are set up individually. And they all adhere to the king, but the king doesn't amass a wide amount of wealth. He is kind of like, in all of these small kingdoms, he is kind of like seen as the person who tries to negotiate deals with other kings and other tribes. And if those go haywire, then war breaks out or they pillage places. So it kind of starts out there, and then they get more organized and they start having royal families, which it's very difficult to say which area is which, because Norway, Denmark, and Sweden, and even Finland at points are all part of a kingdom in a way. And then parts get taken away and then they get given back and then they get taken away and then they get given back and then Russia comes in and then like it goes on for many centuries like this. And really, I'd have to say, out of all of the royal families that we've looked at, the family tree of the Swedes is actually more foreign than any other royal family that we've looked at. Like, I don't really see any Swedes except for our very first ones like Gustav Vasa and Eric the Victorious, who's counted as Sweden's first king, as actual Swedish kings. The rest of them kind of are brought in from other areas to rule over that piece of the world.
Yeah, and that's such an interesting thing to consider. And then if you look at the other royal families, people always think of them as intrinsically the epitome of that country or that society, but actually a lot of them, their roots don't go back terribly far. But in terms of the monarchy, like you said, in Sweden, it goes back a long, long time. I mean, they've had, since the 10th century, they've had one continuous monarchy. Okay, granted, the personnel has changed once or twice. But
so the families as well. Like, it's really, when I was looking through it, it was literally like trying to follow a piece of string through, like, you know, when you're trying to do undo a knot in a chain and it's like connected to like 20 other chains and you're like trying to figure out which part. It's exactly like that. I mean, it's so difficult. And then it doesn't help that a lot of the kings and also the queen consorts or queens have the same names. So it's like Frederick the Fourth and like that is really difficult.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, because when we get to our favorite pieces that we'll be talking about in a moment, when we talk about, you know, what's our highlight of these royal collections, I was trying to trace this one back through the generations, and even looking at the family tree and having the notes in front of you of where it went to, I was like, how did it go from there to there? But you could, but it does, and we'll get into that. But yeah, as you said, a very, very old dynasty that actually the Swedish, in inverted commas, because depending how far back you go, there's got to be someone else, right?
Yes.
You know, they're right back to, you said, the House of Vasa. So we've seen the longevity of the Swedish history over 1,000 years.
But tell me about how did the current family or the Bernadottes. See, the pronunciation is not my strong point, people. Bernadottes. How did they come into? Because that is very much not a Swedish name.
No, and not a Swedish name. Of course, when they got into power, they changed their name. But so it goes back to what you were saying: Norway, Sweden, Finland, Russia. You know, there was chopping and changing of these kingdoms for generations. Finland, good old Finland in the middle, seemed to be the one that was being chopped and changed the most, right? But the Swedes were in control of Finland up until 1809. And
something like 700 years, wasn't it?
Yeah, like, I mean, if you go to Finland, you'll see the second language is Swedish. So all the road signs are Finnish and Swedish. There's Swedish communities there. In school, everybody learned Swedish. So yeah, a very long relationship between the two countries, right? But they had a disastrous war with Russia in 1809, which led to the ceding of Finland to Russia. Now, to the psyche of the Swedish people in the Swedish parliament, they were not happy with this at all. And on the flip side, if you go to continental Europe, you had Napoleon, great general, you know, winning lots of wars, obviously ultimately lost at Waterloo. But so the Swedish parliament were kind of looking at this saying, oh my God, we've just lost, you know, Finland. We've got lots of overseas colonies that we want to keep a hold of. But, you know, our current leadership's just not cutting the mustard here, right? Mm-hmm. So what they did was they turned to France and they looked for a new leader who was one of these successful Napoleonic generals. And the person that they turned to was a man called Bernadotte.
I remember this from studying. France actually originally said, "Oh yes, we've got someone." I think it was Josephine Bonaparte's her nephew or something like that, who they originally put forth as someone who they said, oh, this is who can run Sweden. And the Swedes kind of like, met with him, thought he was a little bit dull and was like, nah, no thanks. He's not for us. And so they turned to a general who was actually very celebrated for his military acumen, let's say, because they, again, like you said, war was still very much in the forefront of their mind and keeping hold of the power that they had at that point. I believe they had Norway still as a part of their kingdom. So they're trying to hold on to what they currently had. And so a general would have been someone who they're kind of like, yeah, he looks like he's powerful. Let's have him instead of the royal nephew.
Yes, which as you mentioned at the start, the Swedish, they're very organized, also very pragmatic. And there was no they didn't care that he wasn't Swedish. Certain royal families that I won't mention that, it's hard to say, but they'd have to have someone who they believed was their own bloodline. But they just thought, this is a great general, Jean-Baptiste Bernadotte. And yeah, they put him in power. He grew up with Napoleon, childhood friends of Napoleon. They'd become somewhat estranged from Napoleon, and Napoleon saw him somewhat as a threat. So actually it was the perfect way. If they sent him up to Sweden, out of the way, he can have an ally of sorts up there. And it was just a perfect solution. And obviously Bernadotte was happy to go up there. I think, wouldn't you be, if you said, would you like to be the royal of a large country?
I mean, for sure. It is a huge change, right? So moving from the world was a lot bigger back then because of our limitations in transportation. So today it's oh yeah, I'll go to Sweden and live there for I can come back. It takes me 2 hours to fly from Sweden to here. I can come back whenever I want. I can come back every weekend if I wanted to. But in those days, travel is not so easy. And if you're going away for at least a couple of weeks, and it makes things more difficult. So it is starting a new life somewhere else, and it is committing to being somewhere where you're not culturally used to, and also doesn't have your creature comforts. But as a military man, I'm sure that would have been okay, whatever. I've got these people who are you're a ruler now. So in listening to everything that I say, I'm sure that was a huge benefit to him.
Definitely. And so, but that is the key thing that happened in 1810. He succeeded as the ruler of Sweden, and he was a Frenchman.
Yeah. And that's how it begins as we know it today, the Swedish royal family. And it continues on until we are where we are now.
Which is with the current monarch, King Carl the 16th Gustav, the 17th monarch of this house. So I think we've talked a good bit about the Swedish royal family there now. And as we noticed with the British royal family, the British crown jewels and the Danish crown jewels in particular, they had a certain structure. There were certain different types of collections, and the Swedish is no different. So first of all, I think what you've got is similar to in Denmark, there is the Swedish crown jewels. Now these consist of historic jewels owned by the Bernadotte Family Foundation as well as private individuals. Now, the interesting thing about the setup of these ones is they were established by Carl the 14th, Johann, who was the original Bernadotte monarch, as a fideikomiss, which I think you'll remember we had another kind of related word in the Danish episode if you listen back. But fideikomiss is from the Latin words fide and commissarat, I believe, which is trust and to commit. The whole point was that these jewels that were left in this collection had to stay within the family. So everyone who inherited them had to pass them on to the next one. You couldn't do anything with them. So they were kind of yours, but they had to stay as property of the Swedish crown.
So with the Swedish Royal Regalia, which is kind of the ceremonial jewels that we usually talk about, they haven't changed as much as the royal family lines have changed. They've stayed very much intact since 1561, with a few exceptions. So in 1561, we have King Eric XIV, and for his coronation, a few things were created. So we have King Eric XIV's sword, his crown, his scepter, his orb, and key. So the crown, each of them symbolize something to do with the coronation. The first is the crown, which represents regal glory and dignity. And then the scepter demonstrates the king's earthly power. The orb has to do with religion. So it's God's appointment of the monarch to rule over a Christian kingdom. And then the sword, which symbolizes how the king is called to defend good and punish evil. So those are part of the Royal Regalia. They used to be used in the coronation ceremony. They're now only displayed for the coronation ceremony. So they haven't been used since before
1970, I think.
Yeah, since before the 1970s. So those are King Eric XIV's. And then we also have a few other crowns that are part of the Swedish Royal Regalia. So we have King Eric XIV's crown, which was created again for the coronation in 1561. And that was created by a Flemish goldsmith called Cornelius Verwilden. This particular crown, if you look at it, it really looks like a lot of the Renaissance style paintings that you see. It's extremely detailed. So we have all of that gold filigree work. It's extremely fussy. And it's very, very three-dimensional, set with natural pearls, set with a very large emerald, rubies, and of course, diamonds. And again, it's the same crown that was last worn only in the 1970s. The two other crowns, we have King Carl X Gustav's crown of the heir apparent. And this particular crown also sits on top of what looks like a velvet cowboy hat. So like cowboy is back in fashion right now, but like this is like looks like one of the very first cowboy hats. Literally it's placed on velvet with an ermine trim, and it is fabulous, number one. But it is also one of the most unusual looking crowns that I would have to say I've seen in any kind of royal regalia. And it has a very, very interesting backstory. It was created in 1650 by Jürgen Dagman. And it was created on the request of Queen Christina, who basically said 17 days before the coronation, she was all ready. She had her own stuff all ready, everything laid out. And then she kind of said, just a reminder, it's actually tradition that the person who is going to take over from me, who is known as the heir apparent, that they have a crown as well. So like somebody has to make him a crown.
In 17 days.
And the jeweler was only told just over a week before the coronation ceremony. So this particular crown was made in about 10 days. So if you have a look at it, it's like It's actually a nightmare for us, Matthew. Like, imagine someone coming to you and going, not I need a crown repaired. I need a crown made from scratch.
Well, like if we're trying to get like, a wedding band made in 10 days, it's a bit of a stretch. Whenever if you're the royal family asking for it, maybe that makes a little difference. But
I know, but even if you went to Carl Fabergé and you said to him, like, I need an Easter egg, I need an egg, an additional egg to the other eggs that you've already spent over a year, each of the eggs creating. Can you have that made in 10 days?
I'm sure they try, but
no. I mean, it would be an absolute no. It would be no. It would be no.
Like the Iranian crown that they got commissioned for the inauguration, that was the whole Van Cleef workshop for 6 months to do that.
Yeah.
So like that's crazy timeline.
Yeah, literally. But if you look at it, it actually, from 1650 until, there was minor alterations that were made to this heir apparent crown in 1772, but everything else has kind of stayed intact since then, with a 7-day job or like a 10-day job to create it. So like have a look in the show notes, the most craziest cowboy hat you've ever seen. It's fab. Want to be an heir apparent just to wear it. Fabulous. But this is, again, like, the power of royalty. This is the power of royalty.
I actually didn't come across this piece in the research for this episode. I've got it in front of me here now. And when you say cowboy hat, it literally looks like a cowboy hat.
Beyonce would want to wear that. And actually, I showed Darcy, who works with us in the shop, I showed her this, and she said, like, that looks like something that Beyonce will wear in her new Cowboy Carter album. For any Beyonce fans out there. But it literally, cowboy is back in season, but the Swedes had it first, all the way back in 1650.
They had it and they set the bar high, and I don't know if anyone's ever going to top it.
The very last one is the Lovisa Elrica Royal Crown, which this has a really interesting backstory as well. And I can't go too far into it, guys. I'm really sorry because we're running out of time and we need to get to our favorite pieces. But this was produced in Stockholm in 1751. It's silver with gilt inside and it's set with diamonds. But the really interesting thing about this particular crown is that it was...
It was pawned or something.
Yeah, it was connected to a coup that was trying to happen because the Queen Lovisa Elrica, did not want just small powers or like less powers for the monarchy. She wanted it to be an absolute monarchy. She didn't want to be a constitutional monarchy. So she was like trying to get absolute power for her husband. So she took this crown, 40 of the largest diamonds were taken out so that she could pawn them in Berlin to get a loan to try and overturn the parliament. Now, she failed. And during that time, the parliament were like, show us the crown. Where's the crown? Show us the crown. She's like, no, I don't want to show you the crown. No, I don't have to show you the crown. Basically, because...
she pawned the diamonds.
Yes. And she replaced them with Swedish rock crystal.
Like... imagine being the pawn shop owner and then... Well, of course, then again, she went to Berlin with it, right?
Yes.
So,
but she had ties there. So her brother was there.
I believe you were in Berlin at the weekend, actually.
I was.
You weren't pawning any royal gems, were you? But so they probably wouldn't have known exactly who she was, although the circles were small enough. But
I think they knew who she was. I think they had to know who she was in order for her to get the loan, right?
And
all ended quite embarrassingly. She got the stones back, kind of tail between the legs. The parliament gave her a little bit of power, but not the power that she wanted. And it all kind of like awkwardly got swept under the rug, like, you know, don't take the crown again, don't take the diamonds again.
And let's never talk about this.
Yeah, exactly. Let's never talk about this again. But it's still in their treasury.
Yeah.
So it's still part of the royal collection.
And I think it's got some beautiful old cut diamonds, which really are our favourite here. So it's a really beautiful piece. I think the final thing to mention is also, much like some of the other collections we looked at, there is also the royal family's personal collections, which are also, especially in Sweden, pretty substantial and contain some really impressive tiaras. I mean, I think the Swedish crown jewel, you have to talk about tiaras a lot, don't you? Because there's some really impressive ones. So, but like notable marriages where brides had important collections that were then brought into the royal family included the Princess Josephine of Luxembourg, who was actually the granddaughter of Napoleon Bonaparte's first wife, Princess Victoria of Baden, who married Gustav V in 1881, and Princess Margaret of Connaught, who married Gustav VI Adolf in 1905. Still to come, we'll be revealing our favourite pieces, including a necklace made out of one of the most beautiful and more unusual gemstones that originated in Russia and travelled through other royal collections before arriving in Sweden. But first, we have some very beautiful new pieces in, which we've added to our Instagram this week. Alyce, can you tell me about one of them?
Since we'll be talking about parures today, Matthew, for this particular episode, I thought I would highlight an amazing parure that has come into our very own collection, which can be viewed on our Instagram. And this is a Georgian parure, which features pink paste gemstones. So this particular piece features 2 bracelets, a head ornament, a necklace, and also other ways that you can wear the corsage ornament that goes into the hair, and of course earrings. So if you want to have a closer look at this piece, it also comes boxed, similar to a parure that we're going to be talking about later in the episode.
If you would like to see them, you'll find us at Courtville Antiques on Instagram. And of course, you will find a direct link to that post in the description area of this podcast. So, Alyce, Ketcher of the Ketcher clan, what is your favourite piece? If you had to pick one, and actually I was looking at this collection and I was thinking of you and thinking, which one would Alyce pick? And there was a few ones that I really thought you would like, actually. So, and I'm not sure which one you've gone for. There was one that has a lot of emeralds, and I know you really love emeralds, but then there was also one that was just super unusual. I don't know, what did you go for?
I just wanted to see you struggle there for an extra second, Matthew.
What I'm thinking is, did you go with the quirky one or did you go with the massive gemstones?
I went with quirky.
Oh.
I went with quirky. So, I mean, one thing that I really love about Scandinavia royal families, right? The Scandies, they're not afraid to wear a good tiara, right? They're not afraid. The women are not afraid. You know, the Nobel Peace Prize is happening. The Queen will show up. The Queen will be wearing a tiara, right? The Swedish Queen will be wearing a tiara. You know, it's New Year's. It's New Year's. Let's all like celebrate New Year's. The Queen will be wearing a tiara. And I love this. This is the reason I believe that royal families are put in the positions that they are put in. Show us the jewels. Wear them. I don't want to see them in a cabinet. I mean, I do want to see them. So yes, lovely. Let's see them in a cabinet. But I want to see them being worn. This is the whole reason for their creation, is that they should be showcased. And I believe that the Scandinavian royal families are the very, very best at doing this, at wearing their jewels and modernizing it and allowing us all to kind of take pleasure in viewing these gorgeous jewels. Now, the number one piece that I just think epitomizes and is so deeply connected with the Swedish royal family in our view of them, that we see it all the time, right, is the cameo parure.
Yeah.
Okay, like people might not know who the Swedish royal family is, but when you say, oh, they're the ones who wear the cameo tiara, they automatically have that vision in their mind. It automatically helps them to remember, oh, okay, yeah, I know who you're talking about now. That royal tiara is probably one of the most recognizable pieces in their collection, because it's always worn by brides, right? There's nothing more pomp than a royal wedding. And people always watch royal weddings. It's in every magazine. It's in pop culture. Women who are getting married look at the styles of the dress. So this particular tiara has French roots. We know that Napoleon Bonaparte loved cameos, and in particular loved ancient Rome. So he had a lot of cameos in the jewelry pieces that he not only wore himself, but that he gifted. And this particular parure consists of not only the crown, but a necklace, bracelet, earrings, and later a brooch. And we do think that there perhaps was a comb at one stage, but that is no longer part of the collection. It's probably been separated. Now, this particular piece was gifted by Napoleon I to Empress Josephine in 1809. So it is a beautiful historic tiara, but some of the cameos on it are actually older than that and depict something really quite beautiful. So it made its way basically into the royal family in 1932 when it was presented as a wedding gift to Princess Sibylla. I'm really sorry, guys. I know I'm getting the pronunciation wrong, but you get my drift. So 1932 is when it lands in Stockholm, and it's been there ever since. You're not going to pry it off their heads. It's staying there forever. And I'm not going to talk about the necklace, the bracelet, the earrings, or the brooch, because each of those are beautiful. They depict portrait cameos, which is like a side profile of a person that's carved. And each of them depict different people, usually Roman goddesses or gods. And those ones all have diamonds surrounding them. So I'm not going to delve too much into those, but I am going to delve into the actual tiara, because this is super romantic. And as Matthew said, it's quirky because it has no diamonds. So this particular piece is set with cameos. There was a documentary that was done recently on the Swedish royal jewels, and there was an expert on it called Cecilia Andren. And she said that some of these cameos that you see in this tiara would have taken over a year or as long as a year to carve these individual cameos. So just for those who are listening who are like, yeah, Alyce, we don't know what a cameo is, like, explain. So a cameo is a picture that is carved with the picture being in relief. So it means that it's kind of standing up away from a background. So they carve into the stone and leave the picture in relief. Usually this is done with gemstones that have a banded appearance so that the color underneath is exposed and the top is a different color, or shell, which again has layers to it, which means that you would be carving away to a different color that is revealed underneath. But on this particular tiara, we have a few different scenes. So yes, we do have Napoleon's own portrait is done on one of them, and a few other gods, which is just the side profile of the gods. But the two that I really want to talk about are scenes that have actually been carved. And one is a scene which has kind of two figures. One is Venus, the goddess of beauty and love. We all know Venus, gorgeous, beautiful. And her son Cupid, who's the god of passion, desire, attraction. And this is how the tiara kind of gets its romantic glow, let's say, because, you know, it automatically, we're talking about love and passion, and they're depicted so beautifully in kind of like an embrace where she's kind of like, you know, touching her son's head. So very sweet. And then the second one is actually the god Bacchus, which is the god of wine and kind of like party, with Cupid, the god of love and attraction, so, and desire. So again, the whole theme that we kind of see in this particular tiara kind of nudges towards love and fun and happiness. And I believe this is why, not only because of its absolute beauty as well, when you look at this particular piece, I believe this is why it has been chosen as the Bernadotte family tiara for their brides. It's been worn by two of the current king's sisters, Princess Brigitte and Princess Desiree. And of course, the current queen, she wore it as well on her wedding day. And then lastly, it was worn in 2010 when Princess Victoria also got married to her personal trainer, which was a really sweet love story. So I think it's like, for me, when I look at that particular tiara, when you understand the symbolism and meaning behind it, and the fact that there's no diamonds on it, we only have pearls and cameos and gold. It's an unusual, symbolic love token that has been passed down from generation to generation. And of course, why would you not want that to be the crowning glory that you wear on your wedding day?
Yeah, it's a beautiful tiara, Alyce, and I think you've described the pictures you see in the cameos there really vividly. Definitely one to have a look, and it stands apart to every other tiara in the collection, even though there's beautiful ones, like, you know, even ones we're not going to talk about, like there's the bridal tiara, there's the Luxembourg sapphire parure, all ones, you know, that, you know, we'll put links in the show notes that you can see. But I'm super glad you did that one, because I think it's understated chic, but also at the same time, it's totally recognizable and unmatched. I think in scale, I think as well, for a cameo piece, it's well worth checking the show notes to have a look at the Swedish cameo tiara. So as I said, there is some really other interesting ones which I'd love to talk about.
Yeah, I'm waiting for yours, Matthew. I'm waiting for yours.
Well, I was going to talk, there's one, they have a tiara that's made out of cut steel, which I also think is very super interesting. They call it the Napoleonic cut steel parure. So again, it wasn't just the tiara, it had a choker, necklace and earrings, and it was all crafted from cut, or, you know, what we call in the trade is called cut steel. If you haven't heard of that, it's steel that's polished to such a high finish that it actually almost looks like a diamond. And I think that one is very interesting, very nice. But you've done the quirky, I'm going to do one that has some gemstones that are going to knock your socks off. So They have an emerald tiara as well, which is quite nice. But the one that I think that stands out for me, and there was a documentary on YouTube about the Scandinavian royal jewels that I looked at just in the lead up to this episode. It was actually in Swedish and Danish, so it's kind of hard.
So did you find it easy or hard to understand?
There was bits of it in English, and there was bits of it in German as well, so I kind of got parts of it. But you see this tiara in the it's actually a necklace. Sorry, you actually see this. It's a suite, but the necklace is the part you really notice, and I think it's made with one of the most beautiful gemstones that you can come across, which is not one of the big four that like sapphire, emerald, ruby, and diamond. Right, a very precious stone, and of course, this is the pink topaz suite of the Swedish royal family.
Love it.
Now, we were talking about the scale of the cameo tiara. This parure or demi parure has enormous pink topazes in it. Big pendulock shaped ones, cushion cut shaped ones. It's been worn as a necklace, and there's 3 big pear shaped topazes that hang off this necklace, and it's a full revere of topazes around the neck, and they are huge, ranging up to 100 carats, and just the most beautiful pink topazes. Its origin, it is actually a Russian piece, and it's also set with a brooch and earrings as well. But how it got there is the parure was a wedding gift. And I know we've talked about the links between the European royal families, but here's a Russian element to it. It was a wedding gift from Tsar Paul I of Russia to his daughter, Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna, not Pavlova, but
yummy.
When she married a Duke Karl Frederick of Saxe-Weimar-Eisenach in 1804, and then the parure was inherited by their daughter Augusta. She became an empress of Germany, and then it went to her daughter, who became the Duchess of Baden, before arriving to Sweden in 1923, when it was inherited by their daughter. So it just shows you.
He said, and then she said that she said he said. Well, he said, she said, we said.
It goes Russia, Germany for quite a few years, Baden, and then Sweden. So I suppose and now the thing is, once it gets into the Swedish royal family, it stays there.
Yeah.
So it won't be marrying out of it.
So one thing that I will say is that when I went to the Fabergé exhibit that happened in the V&A, the pink topaz in particular was used as a gemstone in Russia that denoted happy time spent together. So it was like a gift that you would give to kind of like symbolize happy times that you had together. So I think it's really sweet that it originated as a gift from a father to a daughter because of what that symbolized. And they're such impressive stones. The pink topazes that we see tend to have a very pale pink coloration. It's not very vivid, and it's more of a romantic pastel pink that you see. But the pink coloration that you see in these stones, like you said, one of them is over 100 carats, is so vibrantly pink, and they all match in their different shapes and sizes, that this is such an impressive piece of jewelry and fit for a royal collection.
It's such a great insight. I think, we've seen it in the Danish royal collection and now in the Swedish when they create these royal collections that have rules. Now, I know they can be a bit tricky to follow, but when Queen Victoria, when she retired from official duties, you didn't really see this topaz demi-parure very much, but she left it to the foundation, which was the original fideikomisserum, and it was changed to the foundation. But once it goes into that, it's not passed down like private property. And I think it's something I would have picked up on through this series, is that the royal families that create these sort of communal for them, property of royal
communal for bloodline.
Yeah, but doesn't that seem to make the collection grow and grow? Like the best collections had that. Whereas if they stayed in private property, they tend to move around from house to house until they get to the Swedish collection, then they're stuck.
Yes, and you also get people who decide to change what the materials actually form. So when it's put into a trust or a protection like this, it means that they have a little bit more hoops to jump through to make any kind of changes to it.
You'll see it, and as you mentioned, one thing about the Scandinavian families, they love to wear the pieces, and the pink parure is no different. You can see it being worn a lot of times. Recently, Queen Sylvia debuted the suite again in 1976, pairing it with the Berganza tiara, which is another amazing one that, it's well worth looking at. And that was for her first official portrait. So, again, enhancing the prestige of this piece. Queen Sylvia wore it again for the Crown Princess Victoria's wedding in 2010. So there's lots of opportunities. If you Google this, you can see all the different occasions when it's been worn.
Yeah, and she wore it in 2008 for the Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, I really love them because they wear the jewels. And Queen Sylvia married into the royal family, met her king of a husband at an Olympic Games.
Well, kind of at the gym.
Yeah, at an Olympic Games in the 70s where she was a translator. She is of Brazilian and German heritage. And she was translating there and they kind of just clicked. And she is extremely popular in Sweden, but she also champions these pieces. So she does take them out. She has taught her daughters to also wear these jewels. And it's fabulous to see. It really does keep the jewels relevant, but also I believe the royal family relevant as well.
Now, to finish off on the Swedish crown jewels and Royal Regalia, you could actually go and visit it if you want. Obviously, you'll have to go to Sweden to do that. But they they are available to be seen
in the treasury at the Royal Palace is where you can find them. So they moved there and have been there since the 1970s. And the majority of all of the Royal Regalia, which we spoke of in the collection overview, can be viewed in the treasury. And of course, there's a fee and it's a museum, but it is a great way to be able to actually come in contact with these priceless gems.
So I really hoped you enjoyed hearing about the beautiful collection of the crown jewels from Sweden. Thank you to Raf, who suggested this episode, and we love hearing and sharing your ideas. So if there is something that you would like us to cover, please do email us at experts@courtville.ie. That's experts @courtville.ie. We will be back in 2 weeks with another magical and mysterious pursuit through the world of antique and vintage jewellery, when we'll be revealing the theme of our next very special series. If you enjoy our podcast, please make sure to click the follow on your player so you can get our episodes automatically. And better yet, if you can, share our podcast with a friend of yours, particularly if they like jewellery. That would be fantastic. This really helps the podcast grow, and the more we grow, the better the research we can do and the better guests and stories and gem pursuits we can take you on. As always, a big thank you to my trusty co-host, Alyce Ketcher.
Thanks, Matthew, and everyone.
And thank you to our researcher throughout this series, Veronique Gauguin, based in Paris. Thank you very much, Veronique. And of course, to our podcast producer, dustpod.io. And most of all, thank you to everyone who's listening. I really hope you enjoyed it. And as I mentioned before, don't hesitate to get in contact if you have any suggestions or comments. Until the next time, from me, Matthew Weldon, chat to you very soon.